So we know that Abdu'l-Bahá twice visited Bristol, in 1911 and in 1913. And this in itself is quite remarkable and must really have significance for the city of Bristol in the future, we believe, because for Abdu'l-Bahá, who came twice to England and on both of those occasions visited this city for a few days. He loved Bristol. Abdu'l-Bahá talked about the air, the beautiful fresh air in Bristol, and he enjoyed the scenery. He talked in this room. We know that on 3 occasions, Abdu'l-Bahá addressed a group of believers, probably between 80 and 100 people, according to different accounts, and shared with them the message of peace and love. And his presence has really affected this apartment. And I always remember the first time walking into this room, although at the time it was full of obstructions and the shape was gone, but there was something about the room that was so beautiful and so uplifting and so otherworldly. And so really one of the things that we really tried in doing the renovation, we constantly had in our minds that we didn't want to disturb the atmosphere here.
My name's Jonathan Lees. I'm the architect who's been working on Royal York Crescent with the rest of my team. I think from the first moment we knew that the job was going to be quite special, and it looked like what was a wonderful space that had just been butchered, really, by layers and layers of sort of modernisation, improvement. But the original fabric was just trying to come through. It was very clear that it was going to be a very challenging project, which automatically, it was like a moth to the flame to us. We started off by doing quite a bit of historical work in terms of what we knew about this crescent before we even came here. The issue that we've got with these buildings is that most of them are flats now, well, all of them are flats, and they're privately owned, so we had to kind of knock on doors and say, can we come and have a look at your flat, please? So we were able to have a good sort of nose around, which was helpful, and also having an understanding of the original architect who designed the structure as well, and the period of architecture in terms of the time that this was built and the history of the building, which we knew. We were blessed by having a number of really key photos which informed, greatly informed this, and without that it would have been incredibly difficult.
It was so fascinating. One of the members of the National Assembly mentioned that she had come across a footnote in a book that mentioned that a Mr. Wyndhurst had visited the UK, the British Isles at that time, at the time of Abdu'l-Bahá, and that maybe he would have a brochure from the guest house here. Now, we had searched for such a thing. We had asked members of the family, we had gone to the archives here in Bristol, we knew there was nothing in our own archives in London. We could not find the brochure. And then someone had this inspiration that maybe it would be in the archives in the United States. And this was mentioned literally 4 days before I was due to go to Chicago. So I had the opportunity immediately of going to the archives there in Chicago and finding the brochure. So that was really an amazing kind of occurrence. And of course, the photograph of this room was really very helpful in putting everything together.
One of the early things which we'd seen in the flat was obviously the ornate and really decorative cornice. All of the detail was lost on them pretty much. It just looked like a blob. And we knew something was underneath. It's always very difficult restoring original plasterwork, because by delayering it you can often quite badly damage it. And we had a really interesting pattern on this particular cornice, and it radiates out around the room, which is quite interesting in itself, because it would have been almost a bespoke cornice. And from that original pattern we were able to do a silicone moulding, which was then used to repeat the pattern very faithfully around the room of the areas where the cornice was completely lost. These are the original floorboards, amongst other features that Abdu'l-Bahá would have walked on. We knew the floorboards were going to be original because they were creaking and they'd just been hard-boarded over rather than ripped up. So we effectively went through quite an exercise to label each one of the boards and then to very, very carefully restore the floor. We kept almost every single board, and we laid them back in and then refinished in the colour that we deemed was appropriate. Another really interesting part of the project was our reinterpretation of the main fireplace in the front reception room. We had an incredibly valuable image which have really helped to inform how the rooms have developed. It was a Victorian era fireplace. The design was agreed upon for these very lovely hand-carved elements which we had done from Houghton's of York. These were an interesting interpretation that we could get quite a lot of detail from the photographs on. And they're representative of classical mouldings which we know would have been used during the time, but we wanted to put a kind of a touch on it which was really quite unique. So they're entirely, bespoke design for this project. You'll never see this anywhere else. And likewise with this really unusual engraved section below, and that's balanced by the mirrors, which again are an interpretation of the images in terms of we were able to scale the photographs against the features that we know were in the room to get an appreciation of the size of the mirrors, how they were manufactured, which is how they've now been arranged. Unfortunately, all the wallpaper had been taken off by previous occupants, so we were hoping that we would sort of, get some of these walls and we'd find a little remnant on the wall, and that would be enough, and it'd be layered in paint and we could strip the paint off and find it. But unfortunately, everything was taken back or it was replastered over and had just been lost completely. But in the floorboard, we found an original piece, a very small shard of that wallpaper. And it had enough of the pattern on it to inform, the colour and also the pattern as well. And it was a really big find.
The wallpaper was very dark, and our hearts sank a little when we looked at the dark wallpaper, because we felt it might close the room in to replicate that. So we consulted with the National Spiritual Assembly, and it was decided to renovate certain elements, but not to replicate the whole feeling of the photograph. We were able to replicate the designs that we could see in the wallpaper, but in a much lighter colouring and feeling. We could see carpet along the edge of the room, and it was very light in colour. We felt we'd like to have a Persian rug, just to reference Abdu'l-Bahá's heritage. We really thought of having a carpet that would reference the Persian motifs, but that those motifs would be scattered, that they wouldn't be in a formal Persian design. The best thing we could do is have one made specially. So we worked with this firm in India to produce the carpets. We were after that feeling that when you look at the carpet in one direction, you see quite a lot of pattern. You look in another direction, you don't see so much pattern. So there's kind of movement and feeling in the carpet itself. We had envisaged that the guests coming to visit the apartment would come first to the back room, and maybe they would see some pictures, maybe a video. They would prepare themselves for the visit to the front room, and that the front room would be a place of prayer and meditation, and that would be the visit and the connection with Abdu'l-Bahá's presence here. And then someone discovered a document in our archives in London, not properly filed, not in a place that anybody could search for it and find it, but just sitting in a folder. And this was a letter in reply to a letter from the then Secretary of the National Spiritual Assembly, who had obviously asked Tudor Pole, who owned the guest house here, had asked him the question of where did Abdu'l-Bahá sleep when he was in Bristol. And very clearly, Tudor Pole replies saying that Abdu'l-Bahá slept in a guest room at the back of the sitting room. So then we had to really change our way of looking at the whole apartment. Clearly we couldn't enter by the back room. It was remembered that we had plans which showed a historic door. So we were able to go back to the listed buildings authorities and say that we wanted to reinstate a historic door. And so people would be able to enter this room first and then prepare to visit the room where Abdu'l-Bahá slept. And that then being the most precious part of the apartment, and that would become the place of prayer and quiet meditation.
The two pairs of French doors that were either side of where I'm stood were very clearly 1980s, big glazing bars. We looked at these and we thought, they've got the original, you can see the swirling in the glass, the crown glass, the handmade glass that's here. And they were pretty decrepit, and they were taken out for the whole opening to be refurbished. And they were taken to the side and left on a heap ready to go into the skip. And something happened anyway to make us think, hang on a second, something's not quite right here. We were sort of micro-analysing the photographs of Abdu'l-Bahá stood out on the balcony. We did overlays of drawings to kind of investigate what sort of glazing pattern was behind there. And we basically deciphered that it was this pair of doors that were actually there. It was a very rushed phone call in the morning to make sure the skip didn't get taken out. And they were fine, the glass was still in them, they were absolutely fine. So of course we obviously then completely, overhauled them, reputtied them in and had them set back in place exactly where they would have been. So this is we're very confident is the very pair of doors that Abdu'l-Bahá would have walked out of onto the balcony. So that was one of the very sort of enjoyable moments of discovery. When we started, all of this wrought ironwork was in a really decrepit state. Yeah, all of this was taken away and really lovingly restored with true wrought iron, and proper historic repairs that were carried out to get it back to where it should be. And likewise the floor as well, because the floor had concrete over the top of it. And we took that up and found the original cast iron plates. So this is again the original fabric which we've restored, taken back and obviously repainted.
Walking in this morning, I just was stunned all over again. I think somehow that feeling has stayed, and it just all is so uplifting and so beautiful. There's such a connection with the presence of Abdu'l-Bahá. For me, in the apartment, it's almost like visiting one of the holy places in Israel.
Professionally, the project was fascinating from start to finish. The collaboration between my team and the professionals involved, and also the committee and NSA was always really enjoyable. Every meeting we had, every time we met someone here, every time we did something, there was this kind of this respect or this background feeling that we couldn't necessarily explain. There's something about the space. There's always something about the space, whether it be stood out on the balcony, but in particular in the two rooms. There was always a feeling that I think that we were doing something really special. There was just this respect for history and what had happened in here, but also that you're in a way making history because you're trying to do something which is going to give many, many generations to come the opportunity of coming to this space, which is a sacred place, even for us as well. It's a huge project, I think, and has a layer of importance for the city and for the region as well. And we always felt that there was something else, that impacted us, and it certainly left a mark. And that's why, again, why it's been so important, I think, to us all as a team, really.